Hi, thanks for tuning in to Front Porch Conversations here at Advent Christian Village. As you can see, here the birds are singing and we even have a rooster crowing. So we'll have special sound effects today. But today I have as our guest Jim and Billie Kauffman. Thank you so much for being here with us and sitting on the porch and chatting.
You're welcome.
Glad to be here.
Jim, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Pennsylvania, central part of Pennsylvania. Basically I say that's where I was partially raised. After graduating from high school, I went into service and spent the rest of my life in Florida. Went to the University of Florida. So Florida's my home. I spent 17 years in Pennsylvania and the rest of it in Florida, so I'm now a native of Florida.
Billie, what about you?
I was born in Key West, Florida.
That's about as south as you can get in Florida.
Yes, it was.
Or in the United States.
Yes, and because it was during World War II, my dad was stationed down there, and he rode a horse and kept an eye on the coastline and watching for Japanese subs. What's interesting, my mother had lived up in North Florida all of her life, and I'll never forget her telling me that she went to the store to get some bananas, and they had huge bananas, and so she took them home and tried to eat one, and she couldn't, and of course they weren't bananas.
Oh.
So anyway, and they also had the water collectors on top of the roof, and so she was very unhappy there, and it was hot, and she was pregnant with me. So anyway, very interesting.
I just had never thought about people on horseback as a part of the Coast Guard before.
I know.
I think that's a neat image, though.
Yes, I was telling you yesterday that I had a picture of him at one point, and I can't find it now. My daughters may have it, of him on horseback and how handsome he was in his uniform and that beautiful horse. And the beach spread out around him.
Jim, what branch of the service were you in?
I was in the Air Force. When I went in, you go through a test to tell you what your aptitude is, and they give you the test, and then at the end of the test they said, you're best suited to go into electronics or the mechanical side. And he said, I think we got an opening for you in the technical side, electronic side. So I went through boot camp in San Antonio, Texas. It was in August, and there's no air conditioning, and the sun beating down, and they put us in this Quonset hut, and there was an instructor standing up there in front, and he had a piece of chalk in one hand and an eraser in the other hand, and he started to draw all these gadgets on the. He said, this current does this here and does this here, and he's erasing as he's going. And I'm sitting there and I don't know what he's talking about, and the sweat running down, my shirt was soaking wet, and I looked out the window and I could see the front gate, and there was an air policeman standing out there, all dressed in a uniform, and he had an air-conditioned cubbyhole he backed into when nobody was going through. That's what I need to do. I need to be there. So I asked to be transferred, and that's how I spent my career as an air policeman. Got out in Pine Castle Air Force Base in Orlando, and that's where I spent the rest of my life in Florida. Since I was a citizen, a resident of Florida, why it was cheaper for me to go to school in Florida than it was anywhere else. So that's the reason I went to the University of Florida.
And I understand you have several degrees from the University of Florida?
Well, I got one major and, two minors. Got a major in forestry and a minor in engineering, and really a partial of a minor in rock collection. I got involved in rock collection, and it fascinated me.
It is very fascinating.
Yeah.
Billie, what about you? How did you, after you left Key West, where did you come?
Well, my dad was still in the service, and he was always along the coastline, so we were in Jacksonville Beach for a while, and then Charleston, South Carolina. That's what I've been told. I don't remember any of that. And my brother was born when I was 3 in Charleston. But anyway, when Daddy got out of the service, he was determined to get a job with the government because of the benefits. And so at first he worked at Tallahassee Prison. I don't know the name of it. It was a big prison. And he didn't like that so well, but he wound up with the Soil and Water Conservation Department. And we wound up eventually in Madison. I went to school in Tallahassee for a while. And then we wound up in Madison, and I graduated from Madison High School and did some junior college with things I was interested in, which was piano and voice there. And so I went on with that and played at the church, the organ at the church, for about 20 years.
And that was which church?
Greenville Baptist, the Baptist church. Yes, so anyway, that was a very pleasurable part of my life, although I had to go to the church to practice because I didn't have an organ at home. I had a piano though. So it was a good thing in my life.
Jim, after you got out of the military, where did your career take you? And what did you do?
After I got out of the service, I was looking around trying to find a job, and first couple jobs I got were indoor jobs, and I didn't like the indoor jobs. I was an outdoor person, always have been, and so I ended up working for the Forest Service and fire control for a year or so, and then went to work for a paper company as an equipment operator, clearing land, planting trees. And I can remember that it was in July. I was sitting on a Caterpillar D7. The sun was beating down. In those days there was no cabs on them. The sun was beating down on it, and the transmission that my feet were sitting on was so hot that I think the oil was boiling in them. And I said, you know, Jim, there's a better way to make a living than this. So I was married at that time, and I went back and talked with my wife, and I said, I'm going to go to school. I'm not going to sit on that crawler tractor the rest of my life. So that's how I ended up going to school.
And then the paper company was in Fernandina. Was that your headquarters?
Yeah, after graduation, I went to work for a paper company in Fernandina Beach, and spent 38 years with them in what I call the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire. When I went, at that time when I got out of school, everybody was looking for somebody to go to work. Jobs were available, and this was in this would have been in the early 60s, and the economy was booming. There was a lot of need for paper products, and the company grew from, when I went with them when I first got out of school, we had about 250,000 acres, and by the time I retired, we had over 3.5 million acres of land. But the whole economy was growing. We were building paper mills, processing paper mills. We were buying land, growing trees, and everything rolled up until in the early 90s, and then it turned and went down. It was kind of like the rise and the fall of the Roman Empire. And down we went, and we started selling off paper mills, and all of our jobs were going across the water, and all the products. It started out with the textile industry in North Carolina, and then it worked through every industry that affected the production of paper. It was basically came out of the South because it was built with southern wood, because of the length of the fiber of pine tree is stronger than anything else. So that's they built shipping containers. Basically they started out with the little box to put a shirt in, and then they built another box that held 24 shirts, and then they had another shipping container that would hold 300 boxes. So I had all three sizes.
Mm-hmm.
But that's basically, I ended up and spent 38 years there and retired.
But you did a lot of traveling for the company.
I did,
right?
because I was in the land operation, the engineering, as I said, everything was growing when I first got out of school. They were hungry for production in the woods, and through working with the corporation and several other foundations, we were able to develop and build equipment that would replace the labor. The labor wasn't available to harvest the timber that we needed for the production that was required by the economy. So we went into a 10-year program of building the equipment or help engineering the equipment for the manufacturers and testing it, and to build the production so that we could harvest the trees that we needed to.
And you have children?
I have 2 boys, one in Georgia and one in Florida.
And Billie, what about you?
Okay, let me clarify though that what my mother bought that she thought were bananas were plantains, and they have to be cooked. And I don't think she ever learned, but I have since learned. I love plantains.
Me too.
So they taste. If she had learned, they taste very much like sweet potatoes, and if you fix them a certain way, and she would have loved them because she loves sweet potatoes if she had tried that. But anyway, I have 2 daughters, one in North Carolina and one in Tallahassee, and I miss them greatly, but of course they're living their own lives, and Jim and I are adapting. We have been married 8 years, and because our spouses, previous spouses, had both died. We had each been married 50 years, although we didn't know each other, and a couple of years afterwards is when we met each other. And
Jim, you want to tell us the story about how you located this lady?
My wife my previous wife, first wife, after 51, 52 years being married, passed away. My son that lives in Madison, I think it was in around Thanksgiving time, because I was over there. I had a big motor home and running around all over the country showing tractors, farm tractors, and I was there. I think it was for getting ready for Thanksgiving, and she was sitting at the kitchen table looking at her computer, laptop, on Facebook, and I walked by and I said, "What are you looking at?" She said, "Well, this is the Red Hat Society of Greenville, Florida." And had a picture of them, and they were all lined up with the red hats on. And I said, "Who's that little short one there on the end?" And because she's pretty good looking lady. And she said that she would find out the next day, because she was a school teacher teaching elementary school in Greenville. And she says, "I know most of them, but," she said, "that one I don't know, and I'll find out and let you know." And she did, and that's how I ended up and contacted her. And
he gave me a call. He
Yeah.
called me.
yeah,
And so how long was it after that you got married?
We met in 12, and we got married in 13. Was it 13? It was 13, wasn't it?
yeah.
It was 13.
Yeah.
We got married in
Yeah.
13. We dated
Well, it was right after. Well, let's see. It was actually when I saw your picture on Facebook. It was Thanksgiving, and it was
that was in 11, I think.
that was
probably.
about 11, and then 12. It was real.
Yeah.
Right about that time was when I give you a call.
Yeah.
As soon as I found out about it, so it was it was the beginning of 12, and I asked her if I could come by and visit with her, and so we did, and we had several outings, and as I mentioned previously, I show antique farm tractors, and I was getting ready to go on a trip north, and I asked her if she would want to ride, and I said, "All you have to do is sit in the front seat of that truck and just talk to me every now and then." And she said, "Where are we going?" I said, "Well,"
my main purpose in life.
I said, well, we're going north. We're going to go to 5 shows and be going for 5 weeks. So she loaded up her stuff and we went. And she would say, what state are we in now?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I said, we're in Tennessee now. And a little later she said, what state are we in now?
There was one point we went through 4 states in one day, but it was corners that were
Yeah.
close. And so I got accustomed to asking him, where are we?
Yeah. We left here and went straight to Indiana. And in Indiana we went to Wisconsin, and from Wisconsin came back to Michigan, and then we went to Rolog, Minnesota, and from there to one in South Dakota, and ended up the last show was in Missouri, Columbia, Missouri, and then we came home and she just shook her head. I never saw such stuff, you know.
And I didn't retain a lot of it because it was too much for me. I was a country girl, lived in Greenville, small country, and we lived out on farms. So it was a learning experience, and I've had to learn.
I remember saying, you know how many states we went through? I said, no. We went through 21 states. We drove in 21 states in 5 weeks. But that was our first experience of being off together. So
Yeah.
Jim, tell our viewers a little bit about your interest in tractors. It's more than an interest, isn't it?
Some people say it's an obsession.
Yeah,
but
I do.
The obsession is worn off to a high interest now.
Yeah.
But I started, I guess, when I was about 40 years old. I was born and raised on a farm, but it started about 40 years ago. I started collecting farm tractors, and as I mentioned before, I worked for a pulp and paper company, and we were going through this acceleration program, and there we were buying land in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, and I was involved with that, running all over the country. And most of the people that worked for me, was employed by the company, knew that I had an interest in it, and we'd go out and map a tract of land, and they would draw out timberland, pasture land, farmhouses and stuff, and they would, at that time, fax it to the office, and they'd say, well, do you think we ought to go ahead and bid on this, or you want to buy this? And they knew enough that they had a little thing that they put an X with a circle around it, and that meant there was a farm tractor on that piece of property we were fixing to buy, or a lot of farm equipment sitting in the fence row. And I said, yeah, let's buy that. I want that. What kind of tractor was it? Green, or etc. But anyhow, I got involved in it, restoring. The restoring side was the driving force at the beginning, and then restore them, and then take them to the show and to county fairs and engine shows all over the eastern United States. But my whole purpose of this was to pass the knowledge on to the next generation. This is the way it was done, this is what we've used, and tell them about the history of agriculture and forestry in the United States. And that's when it became an obsession. And at one time I think I had about 35 tractors, restored tractors. Now I'm down to about 20, I guess. Really cutting the fleet down.
And you don't store them in your backyard here?
No. They won't fit in my garage here. I store them in, I have a farm over in Madison County, and that's where I keep everything.
And I think when you're as talented as he is on doing that, it's natural for it to become an obsession. So it's something that I've had to learn, and I accept it and respect him for it now. But it took a little while to get there.
After I retired, I took a trip to out west. I went to Alaska and spent some time out there. And I came back and I said, well, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I had been involved in the tractors, but not to the point of which it was an obsession. And my previous wife, I talked with her, and I said, do you want to travel? You want to do some traveling? And she said, why? And I told her that I was thinking about running the circuit. And the circuit, tractor circuit, is whenever you go from one show to another. It's like a carny. There's a group
Yeah.
of people who have tractors collect together from all over the United States, and they just move from place to place. And at the peak from 2005 until 2010, we were going to about 50 shows a year, scattered all the way from Texas to up into Canada. And we would go for 5, 6, 7, sometimes 8 weeks, and then come back to Florida, make sure the house was still there, the barn was still there, and leave and lock the gate and leave again for another 4 or 5 weeks tour. But we traveled all over the eastern part of the United States, and like I say, up into Canada, selling the message of how agriculture was developed and the equipment that was used. And in the process of doing that, why, I met hundreds and hundreds of great people out in the countryside, as you would call it. But I enjoyed that for 5 years, but I've backed off now. The obsession is gone, and now we're just strong hobby.
When I asked you both yesterday when we were just chatting about your bucket list, would you tell us what you told me? I thought that was a cool answer.
Well, my bucket list is open because the stuff comes up every day that's new and interesting. And I told you the story about after I retired, I made a list of stuff I wanted to do, and there was 2 sheets of list, and I put some timetables to it, and I'd have to live to 110 to accomplish all this. And my goal is to live to be just 100, that's all. And so I scratched a bunch of the stuff off and got down to what I thought was a manageable list of projects to do to make it till I'm 100 years old. And I think I've accomplished 2 things on that whole list, because other stuff jump up in front, new things, new ideas come up. And I think I told you that for instance, electric bicycles, electric vehicles. I didn't pay no attention to electric vehicles. They've been around a long time, and I really had no interest. And I got involved in a company in Arizona that's building a 1-ton dually truck, electric truck, supposed to go 500 miles without charging it, charge it 15 minutes and go another 300 miles. Got interested in that company, and I got digging into the electronics of making electric vehicles, of all the different ways of doing it. And so that's a new interest that's come up in the last year or so that it wasn't in my bucket list, but it is now. My goal is to have a camper that's electrically operated. When you pull into the campground, you were looking for full service. Full service is water, electric, and enough electric to charge my truck up so I can go the next day.
And internet,
And internet.
if possible.
Billie, I know that you said that some of the things you're interested in one is finding a church home here.
Yes, and I still am looking. I'm giving that plenty of time, because I'm sort of riding the fence as I've gotten older, and I've left the church that I had gone to for so many years. It's more difficult than I thought. I did want to add, though, because my daddy was so strongly in benefits, that he kept on with me about getting a job with the Postal Service in Greenville. And I did. I finally did, and I've never regretted it. I think I worked there 27 years, and mainly I have good benefits now because of that too. So I'm thankful that he kept on with me, because I said I don't really want to work at the post office, but I'm glad I did.
There probably weren't a lot of employment opportunities in Greenville.
No, and if I got a job at the post office in Greenville, that was only 3 miles from where I lived.
Yeah.
So I was very thankful to get that. And I enjoyed it, too.
And we didn't tell our viewers, you live in Riverwoods.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. We did.
And how did you come to know about the village?
Well, I lived close in Madison, and there was a group that went out from Greenville Baptist every so often and visited over here. And some people they knew that came from the church or came from Greenville that they would visit as well as others. But I never dreamed that I would live here. I had never even considered it. I didn't think I was going to grow old, I guess.
Jim, what about you?
Well, I guess it goes back to probably in the 70s or early 80s, I guess. Friends of mine in Gainesville, Florida, had their mother and father here, and they lived here. They came here and eventually ended up in the nursing home and Alzheimer's wing and passed away. Well, in that process, I knew them, and she came up here once a week to see her mother. And so I got a little bit involved with that, and as I mentioned before, I was involved in rock collection, and through these people in Gainesville told me about Mr. Cunningham and his rock collection here, and they said, you got to go up and see his rock collection. So I came up here to Dowling Park to see his rock collection, and I had always planned on, in my mind, that this is where I would die at that. And so when my father was 94, I think, and he was about 92, I guess, at the time I brought him up here from Okeechobee. And he lived here the last 2 years of his life. But I could tell real quick that he wasn't a member of the community. He turned into a recluse. He stayed in his room all the time. He would never go out anywhere. And I figured that if I was going to come, I was going to come before I reached that age. So whenever I retired, I considered it with my first wife about going to Dowling Park. We came over a couple times and looked at it, and I said, yeah, I ain't ready yet. I'm not ready to do this here yet. And I just, about every 5 years, we would revisit it. And then after I got married to Billie, I told her about it and going to try to revisit it. And 3 years ago, I said, well, if I'm going to go, I'm going to have to go, because I'm not going to be able to move all the stuff that I have from Fernandina Beach, Florida, to Madison, Florida, if I don't move it now. So that was when we made the big move from Fernandina, where I had lived for 52 years, something like that there. And I had a collection.
Glad y'all have made that choice and are here now.
Yeah.
And I would love for us to sit down again, because there are lots more stories that we could tell.
Oh, I can talk for hours and hours.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, both of you. And
Thank
thanks
you.
for tuning in to Front Porch Conversations.